Wyoming, winter of 1943. The kind of cold that settles into your bones and never quite leaves. Old Tom Dalton sat in his wooden rocking chair, closer to the fireplace than he used to need to be. 85 years had a way of thinning your blood, making winter feel longer, darker, more final. His grandson Henry stood by the window, backlit by the pale afternoon sun filtering through the frost-covered glass. 16 years old, still a boy in so many ways, but the letter in his hand had just made him a man, or at least the government thought so. Grandpa. Henry's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, tried again. They want me to report in 3 weeks. Tom nodded slowly. He had known this day would come. Every boy Henry's age was getting the same letter. The war in Europe was hungry, and it ate young men the way winter ate daylight. You scared? Tom asked. Not unkindly, just honest, the way he had always been with the boy. Henry turned from the window. His jaw was set, trying to look brave, but his eyes betrayed him. I don't know. Maybe. Were you? In your war? Tom was quiet for a long moment. Outside, snow began to fall again, fat flakes drifting past the window like ghosts. He reached beside his chair and pulled out an old wooden box, weathered and worn, held together with brass corners that had turned green with age. Inside, wrapped in cloth that had once been red but had faded to the color of dried roses, was a necklace. Not the kind a white woman would wear. This was made of amul turquoise stones, strung on sinew, with a single eagle feather attached to a leather cord. This story isn't about war, Henry. Tom held the necklace carefully, as if it might crumble in his gnarled hands. This is about the hardest winter of my life, and the woman who saved it. Henry moved closer, drawn by the reverence in his grandfather's voice. He had never seen this necklace before, never heard the story. Sit down, boy. Tom gestured to the other chair. What I'm about to tell you, you'll need to remember. Not for the fighting you're about to do, for the living you'll need to do after. Henry sat. The fire crackled, and old Tom Dalton began to speak, his voice rough but steady, carrying the weight of 65 years of memory. Winter of 1878. I was 31 years old, lone, and certain I would die that way. The wind came from the north that December, carrying with it the promise of a blizzard that would bury the Wyoming Territory under 3 feet of snow. Tom Dalton felt it in his bones hours before the first flakes fell. A man learned to read weather when his survival depended on it. He moved through his evening chores with practiced efficiency. The horses needed to be secured in the stable, extra hay laid down. The chickens needed their coop reinforced. The woodpile needed to be moved closer to the cabin door. Every motion was automatic, born from 5 years of living alone on this 160 acres of government land. Homestead land, his land, earned through the Homestead Act of 1862. 5 years of backbreaking work, of proving he could make something grow in this harsh soil. 5 years of winter and summer, spring floods and autumn droughts. 5 years of solitude. He had not always been alone. Sarah's grave sat on a small rise behind the cabin, marked by a simple wooden cross he had carved himself. 4 years she had been gone. 4 winters without her laughter, her warmth, her presence that had made this isolated homestead feel like a home instead of an exile. She had died giving birth to their son. The baby had not survived either. Tom had buried them together on a cold morning, much like this one, and something inside him had been buried with them. He finished securing the stable door and turned back toward the cabin. The first snowflakes were beginning to fall, small and hard, driven by wind that was already picking up speed. He would need to get inside soon. A blizzard in Wyoming was not something you faced unprepared. That was when he noticed the fence. The split-rail fence that marked the western boundary of his property ran for nearly a quarter mile. He had built it himself, one post at a time, to establish the legal boundaries required by the homestead claim. It was sturdy work, designed to last, but a section of it, about 20 feet long, had been cut, not broken by weather or animals. Cut. The rails lay on the ground, deliberate and clean. Tom's hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his back. Someone had been on his land, recently, within the last few hours based on how little snow had accumulated on the fallen rails. He scanned the tree line, looking for movement. Nothing, just the gathering darkness and the increasing snowfall. Whoever had done this was either gone or hidden. Then he saw the tracks. footprints in the light dusting of snow, leading away from the fence toward the forest. But these were not boot prints. These were bare feet, human feet but unshod, walking through snow that was already below freezing. Tom frowned. No one in their right mind would walk barefoot in this weather. Not unless they had no choice. Not unless they were running from something so terrible that frozen feet were preferable to staying put. He followed the tracks with his eyes, not his feet. They led into the forest, weaving between the pines, heading roughly in the direction of the mountains. Whoever this was, they were heading towards certain death. The mountains in winter were a grave for the unprepared. Tom made a decision. He would check the perimeter of his homestead, make sure no one was trying to shelter too close to his property. If someone was in trouble, he would offer help. If someone was causing trouble, he would deal with that too. The wind was howling now, and the snow was falling thick and fast. Visibility was dropping by the minute. He pulled his coat tighter and began to walk the fence line, following the tracks as best he could. They led him in a rough circle, staying just inside his property boundary, as if the person was trying to stay hidden, but also trying to stay close to the only shelter for miles. Tom's cabin was the only structure within a 10-mile radius. The nearest town, South Pass City, was a 2-day ride in good weather. In a blizzard, it might as well be on the other side of the world. The tracks ended at his back gate, the small gate he used to access the woodpile and the pump house. Someone was standing there, barely visible through the driving snow. A figure, tall and broad-shouldered, swaying slightly as if fighting to remain upright. Tom raised his rifle, not pointing it directly but making it clear he was armed. "Identify yourself!" The figure turned. Even through the snow, Tom could see this was a woman, a large woman, nearly as tall as he was, with shoulders that spoke of hard labor and a life without softness. Her hair was long and black, matted with ice. Her clothing was torn, inadequate for the weather, and her feet were bare, bloody prints in the snow behind her. She looked directly at him, and even at this distance, even in this storm, Tom could see her eyes. Dark eyes, filled with something he recognized from his time in the war. The look of someone who had been cornered, who had run out of options, who had nothing left to lose. Shelter. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the wind. "One night, I work for it." Tom lowered his rifle slightly. The wind tore at his coat and the snow was already accumulating on his shoulders. This woman would be dead within the hour if she stayed outside. That much was certain, but there was something else, something that made him hesitate. She was Indian. He could tell from her features, her clothing, the way she stood despite her obvious exhaustion. Shoshone, most likely. The Shoshone had territory not far from here, though relations between them and white settlers had been tense at best. What was she doing here? Why was she alone? Why had her people let her wander into a blizzard? These questions could wait. Right now, she was a human being on the edge of death, and he was a man with shelter. "Come inside," he said, stepping forward to unlatch the gate. "One more hour out here, and you'll be dead." The woman said nothing. She stepped through the gate, each movement deliberate and painful. Tom could see now just how badly injured she was. Bruises covered her arms, dark purple and yellow against her brown skin. There were cuts on her shoulders, barely scabbed over. She had been beaten. Recently. Thoroughly. He led her toward the cabin, staying close in case she collapsed. She did not. She walked with her back straight, her head up, refusing to show weakness even as her body betrayed her, with trembling limbs and labored breathing. Tom pushed open the cabin door and gestured her inside. The warmth from the fireplace rolled out to meet them, and he saw her eyes close briefly in relief. "Sit by the fire," he said, moving to light the oil lamp on the table. "I'll get you something warm." The woman walked to the fireplace and sat on the floor directly in front of it, her large frame folding down with a grace that had surprised him. She held her hands out toward the flames, and in the growing light, Tom could see the full extent of her injuries. This had not been an accident. Someone had done this to her deliberately, methodically. The bruises were too uniform, the cuts too precise. This was punishment, or something worse. Tom ladled hot soup from the pot that hung over the fire, perpetually simmering with whatever meat and vegetables he had on hand. He poured it into a wooden bowl and held it out to her. She looked at the bowl, then up at him. "Aren't you afraid of me?" Her English was accented but clear. She had learned it from someone who spoke it properly. No. Tom sat down at the table, giving her space. Should I be? White men usually are. Tom thought about this. I just see someone about to freeze to death. That's all. The woman took the bowl and began to eat. She did not gulp it down like a starving animal. She ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each spoonful as if it might be her last meal. Tom watched her without staring, noting the way she kept her eyes on the door, the way her body remained tense despite her exhaustion. She had been running. From what or whom, he did not know, but she had the look of a hunted thing, and Tom knew that look well. He had seen it in the mirror often enough after the war. When she finished, she set the bowl down carefully and pulled the thin blanket he had given her around her shoulders. The fireplace crackled and popped, filling the silence between them. I will leave in the morning, she said, not looking at him. I do not want to cause trouble. Tom glanced at the window. The wind was howling now, rattling the shutters. Snow was piling up against the glass, already 6 inches deep and climbing. Where will you go? She said nothing. Tom leaned back in his chair. The snow is knee-deep already. It'll be waist-deep by morning. Going out there now is suicide. The woman looked at him, suspicion clear in her dark eyes. If I stay, what do you want me to do? Tom understood what she was asking. He had heard stories about what happened to Indian women who found themselves alone with white men. He had seen the evidence of it during his time as a soldier. It was not something he had participated in, but it was something he had witnessed, and the shame of it still sat heavy on his conscience. Nothing, he said firmly. Just stay until the storm passes. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception. Tom met her gaze steadily, letting her look. He had nothing to hide, no ulterior motive beyond basic human decency. Finally, she nodded. She lay down on the wooden floor, using her arm as a pillow, and pulled the blanket over herself. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the rhythm of exhausted sleep. Tom sat at the table for a long time after that, whittling wood to pass the time, occasionally glancing at the woman by his fire. Outside, the storm screamed and raged, but inside, his small cabin was warm and quiet. He thought about Sarah, as he often did on long winter nights, wondered what she would have thought of this situation. She had been kind-hearted, always ready to help anyone in need. She would have approved of bringing this woman in from the cold, but she also would have asked questions. Who was this woman? Why was she alone? What had happened to cause such terrible injuries? Tom looked at the sleeping figure by the fireplace. In sleep, some of the hardness had left her face. She looked younger than he had first thought, maybe mid-20s, but she had the build of someone who had worked hard in all her life, someone who had survived through strength rather than softness. He added another log to the fire and returned to his chair. Tomorrow, when the storm calmed, he would ask his questions. Tonight, it was enough that they were both alive and warm. Outside, the wind howled, the snow fell, and in Tom Dalton's cabin, a strange night began to unfold. Though neither he nor the woman sleeping by his fire yet knew how this single act of mercy would change everything. Tom woke before dawn, a habit from his military days that had never left him. The fire had burned down to embers and the cabin was cold. He stood stiffly, his joints protesting the chill, and began rebuilding the fire. The woman was awake. He had not heard her move, but when he turned with an armful of kindling, he found her sitting up, watching him with those dark, wary eyes. Good morning, he said, keeping his voice neutral and calm. She nodded but said nothing. Tom got the fire going again, coaxing flames from the embers until heat began to fill the room. He put on a pot of coffee, real coffee, one of the few luxuries he allowed himself, and set about making breakfast. Cornmeal mouche, fried salt pork, and the last of the bread he had baked 3 days ago. The woman stood and moved to the window. She looked out at the snow, which had indeed piled up during the night. It was still falling, though not as heavily as before. The world outside was white and silent, beautiful in the way that deadly things often are. It will snow all day, she said quietly. Maybe tomorrow, too. Tom glanced at her. You can read weather? My people have lived in these mountains for many generations. We know the sky. Shoshone? She nodded, still looking out the window. Tom dished out breakfast onto two tin plates and set them on the table. You can tell me your name if you want, or not. Either way, you need to eat. The woman turned from the window. For a moment, Tom thought she would refuse, would assert her independence by declining even this basic kindness. But hunger won out over pride. She sat at the table, and after a brief hesitation, began to eat. Ayanna, she said between bites. My name is Ayanna. Tom Dalton. They ate in silence for a while. Tom could see her taking in the details of the cabin, assessing exits, noting where he kept his weapons. She was being careful, which he understood. She had no reason to trust him. When they finished, Ayanna stood and began gathering the plates. Tom held up a hand to stop her, but she shook her head. You gave shelter. I give work. This is fair. Tom let her wash the dishes in the basin by the pump. While she worked, he pulled on his heavy coat and gloves. I need to check on the animals, he said. The stable and chicken coop are just outside. You can stay here where it is warm. Ayanna dried the last plate and set it on the shelf. I come with you. I know animals. Tom considered arguing but decided against it. If she wanted to help, he would let her. He found an old coat that had belonged to Sarah, too small for Ayanna's frame, but better than the torn clothing she was wearing. He also found boots, thick wool socks, and a hat. Ayanna accepted these without comment, putting them on with efficient movements. The coat barely closed across her broad shoulders, but it would keep her warm enough for the short walk to the stable. They stepped out into the storm together. The wind was not as fierce as the night before, but the cold was brutal, stealing the breath from your lungs and making your eyes water. Tom led the way to the stable, breaking a path through snow that came up to their knees. Inside the stable, 3 horses stamped and snorted, anxious from the storm. Tom had 2 draft horses for heavy work and 1 riding horse, a sturdy mare named Sable. Ayanna moved among them without fear, speaking softly in a language Tom did not understand. The horses calmed under her touch, and she began checking their hooves and running her hands along their legs, with the practiced ease of someone who knew horses well. Tom fed and watered the animals while Ayanna mucked out the stalls. She worked without complaint, lifting and hauling with a strength that genuinely surprised him. She was as strong as most men he knew, maybe stronger. When they finished with the horses, they moved to the chicken coop. The hens were huddled together against the cold, but they were healthy. Tom collected eggs while Ayanna reinforced a section of the coop's roof that had started to sag under the weight of the snow. It was while she was working on the roof that Tom noticed it. Ayanna lifted a wooden beam that normally would have required 2 men to move. She lifted it easily, positioning it overhead and holding it steady while she nailed it into place. She did this without apparent strain, as if the weight meant nothing to her. When she climbed down, Tom could not help but comment, "Have you always been this strong?" Ayanna looked at him, trying to gauge if this was criticism or curiosity. "To survive in my tribe, you must be strong. I am the daughter of a warrior. I learned to work as hard as any man." Tom nodded slowly. "That kind of strength, it is a gift. Not many people have it." Something shifted in Ayanna's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around her eyes. "You do not think it is strange for a woman?" "I think strength comes in many forms. Yours is just more obvious than most." They returned to the cabin, both of them covered in snow, fingers and faces numb from the cold. Tom rebuilt the fire while Ayanna removed the outer layers of clothing. They settled into a rhythm over the next few hours. Tom worked on repairing a saddle that needed new stitching. Ayanna took up the task of mending a hole in one of his shirts, her fingers nimble despite their size. The silence between them was becoming more comfortable. Not friendly yet, but no longer hostile. As afternoon faded toward evening, Tom made more soup, this time with dried beans and pieces of smoked venison. They ate as the wind picked up again outside, the storm settling in for what looked like a long siege. "You asked my name," Ayanna said suddenly, "but you have not asked what happened to me." Tom looked up from his soup. "Figured you would tell me if you wanted to. Or not tell me if you did not. Not my business unless you make it my business." Ayanna set down her spoon. She stared into the fire for a long moment, and Tom could see her wrestling with something internal, some decision she was trying to make. "The wounds on my shoulders," she said finally. "Those were not from the mountain path." Tom said nothing, just waited. People did this. My own people. The words came out flat, emotionless, but Tom could hear the pain beneath them. He set down his own spoon and gave her his full attention. Who? My tribe. Ayanna pulled back the collar of her borrowed shirt, revealing the full extent of the scars. Long, deliberate cuts, made with a knife, made to hurt, made to mark. They wanted me to be a wife to an old man, a man with power and land and warriors. I said no. Tom felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. The same anger he had felt during the war when he saw injustice, when he saw the strong preying on the weak. They beat you for refusing? They said I was a traitor, that I dishonored Standing Bear by refusing him. He already had 2 wives, but he wanted a third. He wanted me because I am strong, because I could work hard and bear strong children. Ayanna's voice remained steady, but her hands were clenched into fists. I told them I would not be owned, so they dragged me to the edge of the village and beat me. They said I was no longer one of them. They said I should leave and never return. Tom stood up from his chair. He walked to the window, not because he wanted to see the storm, but because he needed to move, needed to channel the fury he felt into something other than words. No one has the right, he said, his voice rough. No man, no tribe, no law. No one has the right to do that to you. Ayanna looked at him with surprise. You are angry. For me. A white man. Angry for an Indian woman. Tom turned back to face her. I am angry at injustice. I have seen too much of it. During the war, after the war, I am tired of people treating other people like property, like things to be used and discarded. You were a soldier, Ayanna said. It was not a question. Union Army, cavalry. I saw things I wish I had not seen. I did things I wish I had not done. When the war ended, I came here to get away from all of that, to live quietly, to hurt no one. But you would hurt someone to protect another. Tom met her eyes. Yes, I would. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the small cabin, but inside something had shifted. A boundary had been crossed, not into friendship, not yet, but into something like understanding. Ayanna stood and moved closer to the fire. She sat down on the floor in front of it, as she had the night before, and hugged her knees to her chest. I tested you, she said quietly. Last night when I asked what you wanted from me. I have met white men before. Most of them, when they see an Indian woman alone, they think she is theirs for the taking. I needed to know if you were like them. Tom returned to his chair. And? You are not, Ayanna looked at him over her shoulder. You could have demanded anything. I had nowhere to go, no way to fight back. But you demanded nothing. You offered shelter and asked for nothing in return. That is what decent people do. There are not many decent people. Tom could not argue with that. He had seen enough of the world to know she was right. Decency was rarer than it should be, especially when it came to how people treated those they saw as lesser or different. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Tom whittled a piece of wood, working it into the shape of a small horse. Ayanna watched the fire, her expression distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond the flames. Finally, as full darkness settled outside, Ayanna spoke again. I will leave when the storm ends. I do not want to bring trouble to you. If my tribe learns where I am, they might come. If the people in your town learn you are sheltering me, they will not like it. Tom continued his whittling. Where will you go? I do not know. West, maybe. Away from here. I will find somewhere. The snow will be deep for weeks. The passes will be closed until spring. You would not make it. I am strong. I will survive. Tom set down his knife and wood. Ayanna, I am going to tell you something. You can believe it or not, that is up to you. But I want you to hear it. She turned to look at Em fully, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. You do not have to leave, Tom said. Not tomorrow, not when the storm ends, not until you want to. This cabin has room enough for 2. I have supplies enough to last the winter. If you want to stay, you are welcome to stay. Ayanna stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you need a place to heal. Because winter in these mountains is death for anyone alone and unprepared. And because, Tom paused, searching for the right words. Because I know what it is like to be alone and hurting. I would not wish that on anyone. For the first time since she had arrived, Ayana's hard exterior cracked. Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. You do not know me, she whispered. No, but I know enough. You are strong. You are a survivor. You deserve better than what was done to you. Ayana turned back to the fire. Her shoulders shook once, then stilled. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. It has been a long time since I felt safe. Tom stood and walked to the small bedroom at the back of the cabin. He pulled a spare blanket and pillow from the chest at the foot of his bed and brought them out to the main room. Take the bed tonight, he said, gesturing toward the bedroom. I will sleep out here by the fire. No, this is your home. I will not take your bed. The bed has not been used in 4 years, not since my wife died. It would be good for someone to use it again. Ayana looked at the small bedroom door, then back at Tom. Finally, she nodded. She took the blanket and pillow and disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Tom settled into his chair by the fire. He would not sleep much tonight. He never did on the first night of a big storm, but for the first time in a long while, he did not feel quite so alone. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, two people who had been strangers less than 24 hours ago found themselves sharing a space, sharing warmth, and beginning, perhaps, to share trust. The night stretched on, the fire burned, and in the morning when Tom woke to find Ayana already up and making breakfast, he realized that his cabin, his life, his carefully maintained solitude had begun to change. He was not sure yet if this was a good thing or a dangerous thing, but he knew it was inevitable. The storm lasted 5 days. 5 days of wind that howled like wolves around the cabin. 5 days of snow that fell so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face if you stepped outside. 5 days of being trapped in a small space with someone who was still, in many ways, a stranger. But strangers do not remain strangers when they share work, meals, silence, and the small intimacies of survival. Tom woke each morning before dawn, a habit from his military days that had never left him. He would find Ayana already awake, sitting by the window, watching the darkness give way to gray. She never spoke during these early hours, and Tom learned not to break her silence. Some people needed quiet to face the day. He would rebuild the fire while she prepared breakfast. Cornmeal porridge with dried berries, or fried salt pork with the last of the bread. They ate without speaking much, but the silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had begun to understand each other's rhythms. After breakfast, they worked. There was always work on our homestead, even in the deepest winter. Tom taught Ayana how to oil and maintain his tools, how to sharpen knives and axes on the whetstone. She taught him how to make pemmican from the dried meat and berries he had stored, pounding them together with rendered fat to create a food that would last months. She showed him how to repair moccasins using a bone needle and sinew thread, her large hands surprisingly delicate as they worked the leather. He showed her how to read, tracing letters in the ash on the hearth, teaching her to recognize words. "Why do you teach me this?" she asked one afternoon, her finger tracing the word freedom that he had written. "Because knowledge is power," Tom said. "The more you know, the more choices you have. No one can take that from you." Ayana looked at him for a long moment, then returned to her practice, carefully forming the letters until she could write the word from memory. On the third day, the wind died down enough for them to venture outside. They needed to check on the animals and clear snow from the roofs before the wait became dangerous. Tom bundled up in his heavy coat and was preparing to face the cold alone when Ayana appeared beside him, already dressed in Sarah's old coat and boots. "I come with you," she said. Not a question, a statement. Tom nodded. Together they pushed open the door against the drift that had piled up overnight. The world outside was transformed into something alien and beautiful. Snow covered everything, smoothing rough edges, hiding familiar landmarks. The sky was low and gray, pregnant with more snow to come. They waded through drifts that came up to their thighs, breaking a path to the stable. Inside, the horses were restless, anxious from being confined. Ayana moved among them, speaking softly in Shoshone, her hands gentle as she checked them over. Tom mucked out the stalls while Ayana hauled fresh hay from the storage loft. He watched her lift bales that weighed 70 pounds as if they weighed nothing. She carried two at a time, one under each arm, moving with an efficiency that came from years of hard labor. When they moved to the chicken coop, they found that part of the roof had collapsed under the weight of snow. Tom assessed the damage, calculating what would be needed to repair it. Before he could begin, Ayana was already climbing onto the roof, snow shovel in hand. "Wait," Tom called. "That roof might not hold your weight with all this snow." Ayana looked down at him, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw the hint of a smile on her face. "You think I am too heavy? I think the roof is already compromised. Then I will be quick." She was. Ayana cleared the snow from the damaged section with powerful, efficient strokes, then jumped down with a grace that seemed impossible for someone her size. Together, they hauled a replacement beam from the woodpile. This was when Tom saw the full extent of her strength. The beam was 12 feet long, thick as a man's thigh, made of solid pine. Tom positioned himself to lift one end while Ayana took the other. But before he could get his hands under it, she had already hoisted her end to shoulder height. Tom struggled with his side, grunting with effort, while Ayana waited patiently, holding her half as if it were a broom handle. Together they maneuvered it into position, though Tom knew she could have managed it alone. When the repair was finished and they were back inside the cabin, warming themselves by the fire, Tom spoke carefully. "That beam. Most men could not lift that." Ayana shrugged, rubbing feeling back into her hands. "My father said I was blessed by the spirits with strength. My mother said I was just stubborn and refused to admit when something was too heavy." "It is more than that," Tom said. "You have a gift." "A gift?" Ayana laughed, but there was bitterness in it. "In my tribe, they called me unwomanly, said I should have been born a man. Standing Bear wanted me because I could work like a man but bear children like a woman. A prize cow, nothing more." Tom felt that familiar anger rising again. Standing Bear was a fool. Strength is strength. It does not matter who has it. White people think so too. In the town, when I have gone with my tribe to trade, they stare, they point, they say things. Then they are fools as well. Tom poured coffee for both of them. "Ayana, I am going to tell you something my Sarah used to say. She said that people fear what they do not understand, and they hate what they fear. Your strength makes you different. Different scares people. But different is not wrong. Different is just different." Ayana wrapped her hands around the tin cup, letting the warmth seep into her cold fingers. "Your wife? She was a wise woman?" "She was the wisest person I ever knew." Tom stared into his own cup. "She saw the good in everyone, even in me when I came back from the war full of anger and nightmares. She never judged. She just loved." "You miss her." "Every day." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, the wind resuming its assault on the cabin walls. "I have not been with a man in many moons," Ayana said suddenly. "What about you?" The question caught Tom off guard. He looked up sharply, but Ayana was not looking at him. She was staring into the fire, her expression neutral. "4 years," Tom said quietly, "since Sarah died. You have not taken another woman? The town must have women who would marry you. You have land, a home." "I have not wanted to. Sarah was—" Tom struggled to find words. "She was everything. The thought of trying to replace her, it seemed wrong. Like betraying her memory." Ayana nodded slowly. "In my tribe, when a warrior dies, his widow waits 1 year before she can marry again. Some wait longer, some never marry again. Grief has no rules." "No," Tom agreed, "it does not." Ayana turned to look at him directly. "I offer myself to you as payment for your shelter, your kindness. It is the only thing of value I have to give." Tom set down his cup carefully, as if sudden movement might shatter something fragile between them. He met her eyes directly. "Ayana, what you offer is generous, but I cannot accept it. Not like this." She stood, confusion and hurt flashing across her face. "Then why do you help me? If you do not want what I can offer, why?" "Because leaving you to freeze in that storm would have made me no better than the men who hurt you," Tom said quietly. "I have seen enough cruelty in my lifetime. During the war, after the war, I will not add to it. You needed help, and I could give it. That is reason enough." Tears welled in Ayana's eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, but they fell anyway, tracking down her cheeks in the firelight. "No one has ever said such things to me," she whispered. "My tribe, they only saw what I could do for them. The men who looked at me, they only saw what they could take. But you see me, just me." Tom took a step toward her, then stopped, giving her space. "You are worth seeing, Ayanna. You are worth more than you know." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a rough gesture that reminded Tom how young she really was. Under all that strength and hardness, she was still a young woman who had been hurt too many times. "I will not offer again," she said. "I will not insult you by thinking you are like other men. You did not insult me, you offered what you thought was fair. But my help is not a trade, it is a gift, freely given." Ayanna nodded. She returned to the fire and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. Tom went back to his chair. They sat like that for a long time, the tension slowly easing from the room. When darkness fell and they ate their evening meal, Ayanna spoke again. "Tell me about the war, if you can." Tom was quiet for a moment. He did not like to talk about the war. The memories were sharp and painful, full of things he wished he could forget. But something about Ayanna's direct gaze, her willingness to share her own pain, made him want to reciprocate. "I joined in 1861, he said slowly. "I was 23, full of ideas about honor and duty. I thought war was glorious. I learned fast that it was not." "You killed men." "Yes, many men. I was cavalry, so sometimes we fought on horseback, sometimes on foot. I was good at it, good at killing. That is a terrible thing to be good at. But you fought for what you believed was right, to free the slaves." "Yes, but right does not make killing easier. Every man I killed, he had a family somewhere, a mother who would mourn, maybe a wife, children. I ended those men, and I ended the futures they could have had." Ayanna was quiet, absorbing this. "In my tribe, warriors do not speak of the men they have killed. It is bad medicine. The spirits of the dead can follow you." "They do follow you," Tom said. "Every night in my dreams. Sarah used to hold me when the nightmares came. She would whisper that I was home, that I was safe, that the war was over. Without her," he trailed off, "the nightmares stayed." "Yes, I have nightmares too," Ayanna said softly. "About the beating, about standing bare, about dying alone in the snow. Some nights I wake up and I do not know where I am." "Last night," Tom said, "I heard you cry out. I almost came to check on you." "Why did you not?" "Because I thought you might not want me to. Some pain is private." Ayanna looked at him with something like wonder. "You understand much for a white man." "I understand pain. Pain is the same in every language." They finished their meal in comfortable silence. As Ayanna washed the dishes and Tom banked the fire for the night, a sense of peace settled over the cabin. The storm still raged outside, but inside, two wounded souls had found, if not healing, then at least the beginning of it. On the sixth day, the storm broke. Tom woke to silence. Not the silence of death, but the silence of stillness. The wind had stopped. When he looked out the window, he saw blue sky for the first time in nearly a week. Ayanna was already up, standing by the window, bathed in the pale morning light. She turned when she heard him move. "The storm has passed," she said, "for now. There will be more before winter ends." They went outside together to assess the damage. Snow was piled everywhere, drifts reaching up to the eaves of the cabin in places. The path to the stable was completely buried. It would take hours of hard work to dig out. But the sun was shining, and after days of gray gloom, it felt like a gift. They worked side by side, shoveling snow, clearing paths, checking for damage to the buildings. The cold was brutal, stealing the breath from their lungs, but the work kept them warm. By midday, they had cleared enough to move freely between the cabin, stable, and coop. Tom stood leaning on his shovel, surveying their work. "I need to go into town soon. Supplies are running low. Some things I cannot make or grow myself." Ayanna stiffened slightly. "How far is the town?" "South Pass City, 2 days' ride in good weather. Maybe 3 or 4 now with all this snow." "Will you go soon?" "Within the week, if the weather holds." Ayanna was quiet for a moment. "I would like to go with you." Tom looked at her in surprise. Are you sure? Towns can be difficult. I know, but I need clothing. Real clothing, not borrowed. And boots that fit properly. If I am to stay through winter, I need to be prepared. The casual way she said, if I am to stay, made something warm settle in Tom's chest. She was thinking about staying. That was good. That was more than good. Then you will come, he said. We will go together. They went back to work, clearing the last of the paths. As the sun began to set, painting the snow orange and pink, Tom felt something he had not felt in years. Contentment, maybe even happiness. That night, they sat by the fire as usual. Ayanna was learning to read better, tracing words in a book Tom had given her. Tom was repairing a bridle that had cracked from the cold. The cabin was warm and quiet, filled with the small sounds of domestic life. Tom, Ayanna said suddenly, if my tribe comes looking for me, what will you do? Tom set down the bridle. I will not let them take you. You have chosen to be here. That choice is yours to make, not theirs. They are warriors, many of them. You are one man. Then I will be one man standing in their way. Sometimes that is enough. Ayanna looked at him for a long moment. You would fight for me, a woman you barely know. I would fight against injustice. That is not the same as barely knowing you. I know enough. She smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed her face. You are a strange white man, Tom Dalton. I will take that as a compliment. It is meant as one. They returned to their work, but something had shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but the foundation of something that could become love, given time and care. A week later, with the weather holding clear and cold, they prepared to go to South Pass City. Tom hitched the wagon and loaded it with furs he had trapped to trade. Ayanna dressed in her borrowed clothes, but Tom noticed she had done her best to make them fit better, taking in seams and reinforcing weak spots. The journey took 2 full days. They camped one night in the shelter of a rocky outcrop, sharing the warmth of a small fire and the blankets from the wagon. Tom kept watch while Ayanna slept, his rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of threat. When they arrived in South Pass City on the afternoon of the second day, Ayanna grew very quiet. The town was small, just a main street with a few side roads, maybe 200 people all told. But to someone who had lived most of her life away from white settlements, it must have seemed enormous and alien. People stared as they drove down the main street. Tom could hear the whispers, feel the eyes following them. He kept his own gaze straight ahead, his jaws set. Let them stare. He had done nothing wrong. He stopped the wagon in front of Mrs. Pearl Harrison's general store, the largest building in town. Pearl was a widow who had run the store for 15 years, a sharp-minded woman who treated everyone fairly. Wait here a moment, Tom said to Ayanna. He climbed down and went into the store. Pearl looked up from her account books and smiled. Tom Dalton, I was beginning to think the winter had claimed you. Close, Tom said. That last storm was fierce. It was indeed. What can I do for you? Tom glanced back toward the wagon. I need some supplies, but I also need your help with something else. I have a guest at my homestead, a Shoshone woman. She needs clothing, boots, basic things, but I do not want to cause a scene bringing her in here. Pearl set down her pen and gave Tom a long, measuring look. People are I have to talk either way, Tom, you know that. I know, but I will not leave her sitting in a wagon like cargo. Pearl smiled. Then bring her in. Anyone who has a problem with it can take their business elsewhere. Tom went back outside. Ayanna was sitting rigid in the wagon seat, her hands clenched in her lap. Several men had gathered nearby, watching, muttering to each other. Come inside, Tom said, offering his hand to help her down. Pearl wants to meet you. Ayanna took his hand and climbed down. Together they walked into the store. Tom could feel every eye on them, could hear the whispers growing louder. He ignored them all. Inside, Pearl came around the counter and looked Ayanna up and down with a practiced eye. You are a tall one, she said cheerfully. Lucky for you, I just got a shipment from back east. Let us see what we can find. For the next hour, Pearl helped Ayanna pick out clothing. A heavy wool dress, a proper coat, sturdy boots, undergarments, a hat. She refused to let Tom pay for everything. insisting that Ayanna trade some of the beadwork she had made during the storm. Pearl seemed genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. "You have talent," Pearl told Ayanna. "If you make more of these, I can sell them here. Give you credit toward whatever you need." Ayanna looked surprised and pleased. "You would do that?" "Business is business. Good work is good work. I do not care who makes it." They were loading their supplies into the wagon when trouble arrived in the form of Luther Blackwood. Blackwood was a large man in his mid-40s, dressed in expensive clothes that were too fine for a frontier town. He owned the largest ranch in the area and had made no secret of his desire to acquire more land, including Tom's homestead. He walked up to the wagon with three of his ranch hands trailing behind him. All of them were armed. "Well, well," Blackwood said, his voice dripping with false cheer. "Tom Dalton, heard you had died in the storm. Pity that turned out to be untrue." Tom continued loading the wagon. "Blackwood, I see you have taken in a squaw. How progressive of you." Blackwood looked Ayanna up and down in a way that made Tom's blood boil. "Though I suppose a man gets lonely out on that little patch of dirt you call a homestead." Tom set down the sack he was holding and turned to face Blackwood fully. "Say what you came to say and move along." Blackwood smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "I am here to make you an offer. $500 for your land. That is generous, considering how small it is. Not for sale. Everything is for sale, Dalton. It is just a matter of price. My land is not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Not now, not ever." Blackwood's smile vanished. "You are making a mistake. That land should belong to someone who can make proper use of it. Someone with resources. Someone with a future. My future is my own business. We will see about that." Blackwood tore the paper in half and let the pieces fall to the ground. "When you change your mind, and you will, the offer will be lower. Much lower." He walked away, his ranch hands following. Tom watched them go, a cold certainty settling in his gut. Blackwood was not done. This was not over. Sheriff Jacob Morris appeared from the jailhouse across the street. He was a decent man, honest but pragmatic. He approached Tom with a worried expression. "Tom, I like you. You have never caused trouble and you work hard. But folks are talking. Let them talk. It is not that simple. Blackwood has influence. He has money, and he has the ear of the judge. If he decides to make your life difficult, he can do it." "What am I supposed to do, Jacob? Throw her out to make people comfortable?" Morris sighed. "I'm not saying that. I am saying to watch yourself. Blackwood plays dirty, and he does not like to lose." Tom climbed onto the wagon seat. Ayanna was already sitting there, her face carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I appreciate the warning, Jacob, but I will not change what I am doing because someone else does not like it." They drove out of town in silence. Once they were well away from the buildings, Ayanna finally spoke. "I am bringing you trouble. You are not bringing me anything. Blackwood has wanted my land for years. This is just his latest excuse." "But your sheriff, he warned you. The people in town, they stare and whisper." "I should leave." Tom pulled the wagon to a stop. He turned to look at Ayanna directly. "Listen to me. You are not leaving. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. I do not care what Blackwood says or what the town thinks. You have every right to be there, and I will not let anyone tell you different." Ayanna's eyes shimmered with tears. Why do you do this?" "Because it is right. Because you deserve to be safe. Because—" Tom paused, realizing he was about to say something important. "Because I have been alone for 4 years, and having you there has made that cabin feel like a home again. I do not want to go back to being alone." Ayanna reached out and took his hand. Her grip was strong, warm, alive. "Then I will stay, and whatever comes, we will face it together." Tom squeezed her hand. Together. They drove on toward home as the sun began to set. Behind them, South Pass City faded into the distance. Ahead of them, the mountains loomed, purple and gold in the fading light. Neither of them knew that in a lawyer's office back in town, Luther Blackwood was already putting his plan into motion. A plan that would threaten everything they had begun to build. But for now, for this moment, they had each other. And sometimes that has to be enough. 2 weeks passed in relative peace. Tom and Ayanna fell into an easy routine. They worked together during the day, clearing more snow, repairing winter damage, preparing for the spring thaw that was still months away. In the evenings, they sat by the fire. Tom continued teaching Ayanna to read, and she taught him words in Shoshone. They did not speak about what was developing between them. It was too new, too fragile, but it was there, unmistakable in the way they moved around each other, in the small kindnesses they exchanged, in the comfortable silences they shared. Then, on a cold morning in early February, Sheriff Morris arrived at the homestead. Tom saw him coming from a distance, recognized the horse and rider before they reached the gate. He met Morris at the door, not inviting him inside. Ayanna watched from the window. "Morning, Jacob." "Tom." Morris looked uncomfortable. He held out an official-looking paper. "I'm sorry about this. I have to serve you with a summons." Tom took the paper and unfolded it. The legal language was dense and confusing, but the essential message was clear. Luther Blackwood had filed a claim in district court asserting that Tom's homestead overlapped with land that had been part of a treaty with the Shoshone tribe. Blackwood claimed to have purchased this land from a tribal representative, and therefore Tom's claim was invalid. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, reading it again, to make sure he understood correctly. "My homestead was surveyed by federal officials. The boundaries were established by the land office. This land was never part of any tribal territory." "I know that, and you know that, but Blackwood has papers that say otherwise. Judge Hawthorne has to at least hear the case." Morris shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "You have 30 days to respond. You will need a lawyer." "Where am I supposed to find a lawyer out here?" "Cheyenne, most likely. Or you could represent yourself, but I would not recommend it. Blackwood has the best lawyer money can buy." After Morris left, Tom sat at the table and read the summons over and over, trying to understand how this could be happening. Ayanna sat across from him, waiting. "What does it say?" she asked finally. Tom explained as best he could. Ayanna listened carefully, her expression growing darker. "This is because of me," she said when he finished. "He saw me with you in town. Now he uses my people as a weapon against you. This has nothing to do with you. This is Blackwood trying to steal my land. But he uses Shoshone Treaty as his excuse. He says he bought land from my tribe. This is a lie, yes?" "It has to be, but proving it is another matter." Tom stood up and paced to the window. Outside, the sky was clear and cold. His land, 160 acres of earth that he had worked and fought for and made productive. The thought of losing it to a man like Blackwood filled him with rage. But rage would not help. He needed to think clearly. "I have to go to Cheyenne," he said. "I need to find a lawyer, someone who can fight this." "How long will you be gone?" "At least a week, maybe longer." Tom turned to look at her. "Will you be all right here alone?" Ayanna stood up. "I will be fine. I can care for the animals in the homestead. But Tom, be careful. This man Blackwood, he is dangerous." "I know." Tom prepared for the journey to Cheyenne. He packed supplies for a week, loaded his rifle, and left detailed instructions for Ayanna on caring for the homestead. On the morning he left, they stood together by the wagon. "Come back," Ayanna said simply. "I will. I promise." The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days of hard riding through snow-covered trails. Tom pushed himself and his horse as fast as he dared, anxious to find help and return home. Cheyenne was a real city compared to South Pass City. Buildings of brick and stone, paved streets, electric lights. Tom felt out of place among the well-dressed men and women going about their business. He was a homesteader, rough and weathered, and this city reminded him of everything he had left behind after the war. He found the law office of Edwin Carter on the second day. Carter was a man in his late 50s, gray-haired but vigorous, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had served in the Union Army as well, and when Tom mentioned his own service, Carter invited him in immediately. Tom explained the situation, showed Carter the summons. The lawyer read it carefully, making notes. "This is clearly fraudulent," Carter said finally, "but proving fraud in court can be difficult. Blackwood has money, which means he can afford convincing forgeries. And so what do I do?" Carter leaned back in his chair, thinking. "We have two options. First, we can fight this head on. Prove that the land was never tribal territory, that Blackwood's purchase is invalid. This will require testimony, documents, possibly bringing in federal surveyors. It will take time and money. I do not have much money. I suspected as much, which brings us to the second option. Carter leaned forward. You said you have a Shoshone woman living on your homestead. What is your relationship to her? She is, we are, Tom struggled to find the right words. She is under my protection. Are you married? No. Carter nodded slowly. Here is the interesting thing about the law, Tom. If you were married to Miss Red Wolf, she would become your legal dependent, a citizen by marriage. Her presence on your homestead would be completely legal and proper. More than that, as a Shoshone woman married to a white man, she could testify that the land was never tribal territory. Her testimony would carry significant weight. Tom stared at the lawyer. You are saying I should marry her to win a lawsuit? I am saying that marriage would solve several legal problems at once. It would establish her right to be on your land. It would give you a witness who can refute Blackwood's claims. And frankly, it would make you look more respectable in the eyes of the court. Tom stood up and walked to the window. Marriage. He had not thought about marriage since Sarah died, had not imagined taking another wife. But Ayanna was not just another woman. She was someone who had become important to him, someone he had begun to care for deeply. Still, to marry for legal convenience felt wrong. Marriage should be about love, not lawsuits. I need time to think about this, Tom said. You have 30 days until you need to respond. But Tom, I will be honest with you. Without marriage or significant funds to fight this properly, your chances in court are not good. Blackwood has stacked the deck against you. Tom left the law office with Carter's words echoing in his head. He spent one more night in Cheyenne, unable to sleep, thinking about what to do. By morning, he had made his decision. He found Carter early and told him to prepare the necessary documents. Then he bought a small silver ring from a jeweler, spent money he could not really afford on something that suddenly seemed very important. The ride home took 3 days again. Tom used every mile to think about what he would say to Ayanna, how he would explain this. Would she agree? Would she feel used, manipulated? Would this destroy the trust they had built? He arrived home just as the sun was setting on the 6th day. Ayanna was at the corral feeding the horses. When she saw him, her face lit up with relief and something else. Something that made Tom's heart beat faster. You came back, she said, walking to meet him. I told you I would. She helped him unsaddle his horse and carry his things inside. Tom built up the fire while she made coffee. They sat at the table, and Tom explained everything the lawyer had said. When he finished, Ayanna was quiet for a long time. So you want to marry me to save your land, she said finally. No, yes, Tom took a deep breath. The lawyer says marriage would help our case legally, but Ayanna, I am not asking you just because of the law. Then why are you asking? Tom pulled the small silver ring from his pocket and set it on the table between them. Because over these past weeks you have become important to me. Because I look forward to seeing you every morning and talking with you every evening. Because this cabin feels empty when you are not in it. Because, he met her eyes. Because I think I could love you. Maybe I already do. I just did not realize it until I thought about losing all of this. Ayanna picked up the ring, turning it over in her fingers. This is not how I imagined being asked to marry. I know. This is all wrong. You deserve romance, courtship, time, not a legal emergency. But the time has run out. Yes, Ayanna closed her hand around the ring. In my tribe, when a man wants to marry a woman, he must prove his worth. He must show he can provide, protect, honor her. You have already done these things, Tom Dalton. You have given me shelter, safety, respect, things no other man has given me. Is that a yes? Ayanna smiled. That is a yes, but not just because of your land. Because I choose you, because I want this life we are building, because I think I could love you too. Tom stood and moved around the table. He took Ayanna's hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then we will marry, he said. We will fight Blackwood together. And whatever happens, we face it as husband and wife. Ayanna pulled him close, and for the first time, they embraced fully. Her strength was apparent and even in gentleness. His steadiness was a comfort to her uncertainty. Two damaged people finding in each other something they thought they had lost forever. The possibility of healing. The promise of home. Outside, winter continued its grip on the land. But inside Tom Dalton's cabin, something warmer than any fire was beginning to grow. Something that not even Luther Blackwood could extinguish, though he would certainly try. A week after the white man's wedding ceremony, Tom was repairing fence posts on the north boundary when he felt eyes watching him. He straightened slowly, hand moving toward his rifle, and scanned the tree line. 4 riders sat motionless on the ridge above, silhouetted against the gray winter sky. Even at this distance, Tom could see they were Shoshone warriors. Not Running Elk's men, these were different. Tom did not run. He stood in the open, rifle in one hand, and waited. The riders descended the slope in single file. As they drew closer, Tom could make out their faces. War paint, grim expressions. The leader was an older warrior, perhaps 50, with a thick scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His 3 companions were younger, harder, their hands resting on weapons. They stopped 30 feet away. The scarred warrior spoke in heavily accented English. "Where is the woman called Ayanna, the one who shamed Standing Bear?" Tom kept his voice level. "She is my wife, under the protection of American law." The warrior spat into the snow. "Your law is paper. Our law is blood. She dishonored a chief. That debt does not die with him." "Standing Bear is dead. Running Elk said she was free to return. There is no debt. Running Elk is young. He does not understand the old ways." The scarred warrior gestured to his men. "We are the old guard. We remember. The woman must face justice." Tom shifted his weight, positioning himself more squarely between the warriors in the cabin. "She has already faced your justice. You beat her and left her to die. That debt is paid. You do not decide what is paid, white man." The cabin door opened. Ayanna stepped out, rifle in her hands, moving with deliberate calm to stand beside Tom. She spoke in rapid Shoshone, her voice hard as stone. The scarred warrior responded, his tone mocking. An argument erupted, voices rising in sharp exchanges Tom could not understand. But he understood the body language. The warriors were moving their horses closer, separating, trying to flank them. Tom raised his rifle, not pointing it at anyone, just raising it. A warning. "Ayanna," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the warriors. "What are they saying?" "They say I brought shame to the tribe by refusing Standing Bear. They say I compounded that shame by marrying a white man. They want to take me back to face the council of old men." Her voice was steady, but Tom heard the fear beneath it. "They say you cannot stop them. 4 warriors against 1 old soldier and a disgraced woman." The scarred warrior smiled, showing gaps where teeth had been knocked out long ago. He began to raise his war club. Then, from the forest behind the cabin, more riders emerged. Running Elk and 8 warriors, all armed, all moving to form a protective line behind Tom and Ayanna. They had been watching, waiting. Running Elk rode forward until his horse stood level with the scarred warriors. He spoke in Shoshone, his voice carrying authority. The scarred warrior argued back, gesturing angrily at Ayanna, but Running Elk cut him off with a sharp command. Ayanna translated in a whisper. "Running Elk says I am under tribal protection now. Any who harm me must first face him and his warriors. He says the old ways included protecting family, and I am his sister. He says Standing Bear himself released me by casting me out. There is no debt because there is no longer any connection." The scarred warrior's jaw worked. He looked at Running Elk's armed men, then at Tom and Ayanna, then back at Running Elk. The mathematics of violence were clear. He could not win this fight. "This is not finished," he said in English, his eyes locked on Tom. "You hide behind others' protection. That makes you weak." Tom took a step forward, still holding his rifle loosely. "I stand beside my wife. That does not make me weak. That makes me a man who honors his vows. If you want to test that, step down from your horse and we will settle this without armies." The scarred warrior considered this. For a long moment, Tom thought he would accept. Then Running Elk spoke again in Shoshone, sharp and final. The scarred warrior spat once more, wheeled his horse, and rode back up the ridge. His 3 companions followed. They crested the hill and disappeared into the pine forest. Running Elk dismounted and approached Tom. They will not return. I have made it clear that harming you or my sister means war with my band. They are old warriors, but they are not fools. Tom lowered his rifle, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Thank you. I did not know you were watching. I have been watching since the wedding. I knew the old guard might come. They do not accept change easily. Running Elk looked at Ayana. You are safe now, sister. Huli safe. Ayana embraced her brother, and Tom saw tears on her face for the second time since he had known her. Not tears of pain this time, but of relief. After Running Elk and his warriors departed, Tom and Ayana stood in the yard, watching the empty ridge where the hostile warriors had been. You would have fought them, Ayana said. It was not a question. Yes. 4 against 1. You would have died. Probably, but I would not have let them take you. Ayana turned to face him, placed both hands on his chest. This is what love means then. To stand when you cannot win. To fight when you cannot survive. Tom covered her hands with his own. Love means I cannot imagine a world where I let them hurt you. So yes, I would have fought, and I would do it again. She kissed him then, there in the cold yard with the wind picking up and snow beginning to fall again. When they finally went inside, Tom barred the door and loaded extra ammunition. The threat had passed for now. But he knew, as all men who have fought wars know, that some enemies never truly surrender. They only wait for a better moment. The wedding was planned for 3 days hence. Tom needed to ride to South Pass City to inform Judge Hawthorne of his intention to marry, to ensure the legal process was proper and binding. Ayana spent those days preparing, though she had little to prepare with. She washed and mended her new dress from Mrs. Harrison's store, practiced the English words she would need to say during the ceremony. On the second night, as they sat by the fire going over the legal documents Edwin Carter had sent, they heard horses approaching. Not one horse, but several. Tom was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window. 3 riders, maybe 4, hard to tell in the darkness. They stopped at the gate but did not dismount. Tom could see they were Indian, though he could not make out details in the dim light. Stay in bed, he told Ayana, but she was already standing beside him, looking out into the night. Her breath caught. Running Elk. Who? My brother. Before Tom could respond, Ayana had opened the door and stepped outside. Tom followed, keeping his rifle ready but not raised. The cold hit them like a physical blow, but Ayana did not seem to notice. She walked toward the gate, toward the riders. The man in front dismounted. He was tall, lean, with the bearing of a warrior. His face was weathered, marked with old scars. He wore traditional Shoshone clothing under a heavy buffalo robe. When he saw Ayana, he stopped. Sister, he said in English, then continued in Shoshone. Ayana responded in the same language, her voice tight with emotion. The conversation went back and forth for several minutes. Tom stood on the porch, watching, trying to read the body language, even if he could not understand the words. Finally, Ayana turned and gestured for Tom to come forward. He approached slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening. The other 2 riders had dismounted now as well. All 3 men were armed, but none had drawn weapons. Tom Dalton, Ayana said formally, this is Running Elk, my brother. He comes in peace. Running Elk looked Tom up and down with an assessing gaze. Then he spoke in accented but clear English. I followed my sister's trail from the day they cast her out. I have watched this place for many days. I needed to be certain that she was safe before I approached. Tom felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. You have been watching us? Yes, I have seen how you treat her, how you work beside her, teach her, respect her. Running Elk stepped closer. I am ashamed I did not stop what my people did to her. I should have spoken against Standing Bear. I should have protected her. Why did you not? Tom asked, not accusingly, just curious. Standing Bear was chief. To challenge him would have meant exile or death. I am a coward. I chose my place in the tribe over my sister's safety. Running Elk looked at Ayana. I have come to ask forgiveness, and to tell you that Standing Bear is dead. Ayana's eyes widened. Dead? How? Sickness, the coughing sickness that takes so many in winter. He died 3 weeks ago. The tribe now has a council of elders. I am one of them. Running Elk paused. I have come to bring you home, if you wish. You are no longer outcast. You are welcome to return. Tom felt his stomach drop. Of course she would want to go back. She had been torn from her people, her culture, everything she knew. Now she could return with honor. Why would she stay with a white stranger on an isolated homestead? But Ayanna shook her head. I thank you, brother, but this is my home now, here, with this man. Running Elk looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. You are married. We will be, in 3 days. Running Elk was silent for a long moment. Then he looked directly at Tom. You marry her properly? By your law? Yes, by white man's law she will be my wife, protected, respected. And by our law, will you honor our customs as well? Tom had not thought of this. He looked at Ayanna, saw the hope in her eyes. This mattered to her. Of course it did. She was giving up so much to stay with him. The least he could do was honor her traditions. If you will teach me what to do, yes, I will honor both customs. Running Elk nodded slowly. A smile the first Tom had seen from him crossed his face. Then you are not just a white man. You are a man who sees beyond color. This is good. This is very good. He turned to his companions and spoke in Shoshone. They nodded and began unpacking supplies from their horses. Tom looked at Ayanna in confusion. What is happening? My brother will help us prepare for both ceremonies. Tomorrow we do the Shoshone wedding. The day after, we do the white man's wedding. This way, both worlds recognize our union. Running Elk and his companions stayed the night, though they chose to sleep in the stable rather than impose on the small cabin. Tom and Ayanna sat up late by the fire while she explained what the Shoshone ceremony would involve. It is simple, she said. We exchange gifts, we speak our promises in front of witnesses, we share food from the same bowl. Running Elk will bless us with smoke from sacred herbs and ask the spirits to watch over our union. And what kind of gifts? Something personal, something that represents who we are and what we promise to give. Tom thought about this. He had so little that was truly personal. His rifle had been his father's. His watch had been Sarah's gift. Then he remembered something he had carved during the winter, a small horse from pine wood. He had made it without thinking, just to keep his hands busy. But looking at it now, he realized it represented what he was offering Ayanna. His home, his land, his life. Freedom to run, but also a place to return to. I have something, he said. As do I, Ayanna replied. She went to the bedroom and returned with a beaded necklace she had been working on in secret. It was made from elk teeth and turquoise stones, with a pattern that she explained represented an eagle and a bear walking side by side. Different creatures but moving in the same direction. It is beautiful, Tom said. It is us, Ayanna replied simply. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Running Elk chose a spot on the small rise behind the cabin, the same place where Sarah's grave stood. Tom felt a moment of uncertainty about this, but then realized Sarah would have approved. She had always believed love was something to be celebrated, not something to mourn. Running Elk built a small fire and arranged stones in a circle. The two younger warriors, whose names Tom learned were Swift Fox and Gray Cloud, stood as witnesses. Ayanna wore her best dress and had braided her long black hair with feathers. Tom wore his cleanest clothes and had trimmed his beard. The ceremony began with Running Elk speaking in Shoshone, his words rhythmic and melodic. He burned sage and sweetgrass, letting the smoke drift over Tom and Ayanna. Then he gestured for them to speak. Ayanna went first. She spoke in Shoshone, her voice strong and clear. Then she translated for Tom. I promise to stand beside you in all seasons, to be your strength when you are weak, to carry burdens when they become too heavy, to bear children if the spirits allow, to build a life that honors both my people and yours. I choose you freely, Tom Dalton, not because I must, but because I want to. Then it was Tom's turn. He had practiced the words in Shoshone that Ayanna had taught him, though his pronunciation was rough. I promise to protect you, to respect you, to walk beside you through all hardships. I will never own you, but I will always honor you. I give you my home, my name, and my heart. I choose you, Ayanna Redwolf, and I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. Running Elk smiled at Tom's attempt at his language. Your words are clumsy, white man, but your heart speaks clearly. This is good. They exchanged gifts. Tom gave Ayanna the carved horse. She gave him the beaded necklace. Tom put it on immediately, feeling the weight of it against his chest. It was not just a necklace. It was a symbol of acceptance, of being welcomed into a culture that was not his own. Finally, Running Elk produced a bowl of stew he had prepared that morning. Tom and Ayanna each took the same spoon and ate from the same bowl, sharing the food, literally and symbolically sharing their lives. You are married in the eyes of the Shoshone, Running Elk pronounced. May your union be blessed with many years, many children, and much joy. Swift Fox and Gray Cloud let out whoops of celebration. Even Running Elk smiled broadly. They returned to the cabin for a meal, simple but festive. Running Elk told stories of Ayanna as a child, how even then she had been stronger and more stubborn than most boys. Tom told stories of his time building the homestead, of the struggles and small victories. As the sun began to set, Running Elk prepared to leave. But before mounting his horse, he pulled Tom aside. There is something you should know, he said quietly. Your enemy, the man Blackwood. He has been to our tribe. Tom felt his blood run cold. When? 2 moons ago, before the big snow, he came with papers and money. He wanted to buy land from us. Our elders refused. We do not sell land that was never ours to sell. But Blackwood was angry. He said he would get what he wanted with or without our permission. Did he mention me? Not by name. But he spoke of homesteaders on his land. He said he would remove them soon. Running Elk placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. Watch yourself, brother. This man is dangerous. He has no honor. I know, we go to court in 2 weeks. If you need help, send word. The Shoshone do not forget our debts. You have given my sister safety and respect. We will stand with you if called. After Running Elk and his companions left, Tom and Ayanna stood together watching the riders disappear into the dusk. Tom's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Tomorrow we do the white man's ceremony, Ayanna said. Are you nervous? No. Are you? No, I have already married you in my heart. The rest is just words for others to hear. They went inside as darkness fell. Tomorrow would bring the legal ceremony, the one that would protect Ayanna under white man's law, the one that would strengthen their case against Blackwood. But tonight they were already husband and wife in all the ways that truly mattered. Judge William Hawthorne was a stern man who believed deeply in the law. He had agreed to perform the ceremony in his office in South Pass City, though Tom could tell he had reservations. The judge's office was small, lined with law books, smelling of pipe tobacco and old paper. Mrs. Pearl Harrison stood as a witness, along with Dr. Samuel Reed, the town doctor who had treated Tom for a broken arm 2 years prior. Both had come without hesitation when Tom asked. Sheriff Morris was there too, standing awkwardly in the corner, his hat in his hands. Ayanna wore her new dress, the dark blue wool that Mrs. Harrison had helped her pick out. She had left her hair down, the way Tom liked it. Around her neck, she wore the traditional Shoshone necklace Running Elk had given her, a statement that she was not abandoning her heritage even as she entered into white society. Tom wore his one good suit, dark and severe, making him look older than his 31 years. Around his neck, he wore the beaded necklace Ayanna had made, a matching statement of acceptance. Judge Hawthorne cleared his throat and opened the legal text. We are gathered here today to join Thomas Dalton and Ayanna Redwolf in the bonds of matrimony. This is a serious commitment, binding under the laws of the Wyoming Territory and the United States of America. He went through the standard vows, his voice formal and detached. Tom and Ayanna repeated the words as required. I take thee to be my lawfully wedded wife. I take thee to be my lawfully wedded husband, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. When it came time for rings, Tom produced the silver band he had bought in Cheyenne. Ayanna had no ring to give him, but she reached up and touched the beaded necklace he wore. This is my ring to you, she said softly. Already given, already accepted. Judge Hawthorne raised an eyebrow but nodded. Very well. By the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I now pronounce you man and wife. Mr. Dalton, you may kiss your bride. Tom had thought about this moment, wondered if it would feel awkward or forced given the circumstances. But when he leaned in and kissed Ayanna, when her strong arms came up to wrap around him and she kissed him back and with surprising tenderness, it felt entirely right. Mrs. Harrison dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Utter Reed clapped Tom on the back. Even Sheriff Morris managed a smile. They signed the necessary papers. Judge Hawthorne recorded the marriage in his official log. Ayanna Redwolf was now Ayanna Dalton, with all the legal rights and protections that came with being a white man's wife. As they prepared to leave, Judge Hawthorne called Tom aside. "Mr. Dalton, I am aware of the lawsuit Mr. Blackwood has filed against you." "Yes, Your Honor." "I want you to know that I will judge that case based solely on the evidence in the law. Your marriage today, while convenient timing, does not influence my decision one way or another." "I would not expect it to, sir. However, I will say this. Mr. Blackwood's claim seems unusual to me. I have reviewed the original survey documents for your homestead, and I find no indication of overlap with tribal lands. But that is for the court to decide officially." The judge paused. "Watch yourself, Dalton. Blackwood does not like to lose, and he has resources most men do not." "I will, sir. Thank you." Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Harrison had arranged a small celebration at her store. She had baked a cake, real cake with sugar and eggs, a luxury in these parts. Several townspeople had gathered, more out of curiosity than congratulations, but their presence made the event feel more legitimate. Luther Blackwood walked past the store while the celebration was happening. He stopped, looked through the window at the gathering, his face darkening with anger. He made eye contact with Tom, and the hatred in that look was unmistakable. Then he turned and walked away, his boots heavy on the wooden sidewalk. "He knows," Ayanna said quietly. "Yes, he knows." They returned to the homestead that evening as the sun was setting. Tom helped Ayanna down from the wagon, and for a moment they just stood there looking at the small cabin that was now legally their shared home. "Are you happy?" Tom asked. "Yes. Are you?" "More than I have been in a very long time." That night they consummated their marriage. It was not rushed or awkward. They came together as two people who had learned to trust each other, who had built something real before adding physical intimacy to it. Ayanna's strength was matched by surprising gentleness. Tom's careful respect gave way to genuine passion. Afterward, lying together in the small bed, Ayanna traced the scars on Tom's chest, old wounds from the war. "Tell me about these," she said. "This one was a bayonet at Gettysburg. This one was shrapnel at Cold Harbor. This one was a Confederate officer's saber at Petersburg. You have survived much. So have you." Tom touched the scars on her shoulders, the marks left by her own people's cruelty. "We are both warriors," Ayanna said. "We both carry our battles on our skin." "Yes, but maybe together we can lay down our weapons. Maybe together we can find peace." "I would like that." They slept deeply that night, tangled together, two people who had been alone for so long, finally finding comfort in another's presence. The weeks following the wedding were perhaps the happiest of Tom's life since Sarah's death. He and Ayanna worked side by side every day, and the work seemed lighter for being shared. They talked easily now about everything and nothing. They laughed more than either had in years. The legal case hung over them like a storm cloud, but they tried not to let it dominate their lives. Edwin Carter had come out from Cheyenne to prepare their defense. He interviewed Ayanna extensively, documented her knowledge of tribal territories, prepared maps and surveys. "Your testimony will be crucial," Carter told her. "Blackwood's entire case rests on the claim that this land was part of a Shoshone Treaty area. You can refute that directly." "I will tell the truth," Ayanna said. "This land was never ours. It was Crow territory long before white men came. My grandmother was Crow. She told me stories of this valley. The Crow called it Place of No Elk because the hunting was poor here. They avoided it." Carter smiled. "That is exactly the kind of detail we need." As March arrived, bringing with it the first hints of spring, Ayanna began acting strangely. She was tired in the mornings, something unlike her. She avoided certain foods. Tom noticed but said nothing, not wanting to pry. Then one evening, as they sat outside on the porch watching the sunset, Ayanna placed her hand on her belly. "Tom," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He looked at her, saw the mixture of joy and fear in her eyes, and suddenly he knew. "You are pregnant." Yes, 2 months, I think, maybe a little more. Tom felt his throat tighten with emotion. A child. He was going to be a father. The dream that had died with Sarah and their baby was being given back to him. But with the joy came fear. What if something went wrong? What if he lost Ayana the way he had lost Sarah? Hey, Ayana said, seeing the fear in his face. She took his hand and pressed it to her belly. I am not her. I am strong. I will survive this. We will survive this. You cannot know that. No, but I choose to believe it. And you must too. Tom pulled her close, holding her carefully now, aware of the precious life growing inside her. A child, he whispered. We are going to have a child. Yes, what do you want, boy or girl? I do not care. As long as you both survive, I do not care. If it is a girl, I want to name her Sarah, after your first wife, to honor her memory. Tom felt tears sting his eyes. And if it is a boy? Elijah, after you, but also different. Our own son, not a replacement for anyone. They sat like that as darkness fell, planning a future that suddenly seemed both more precious and more fragile than ever. The next morning, Tom rode to town to send a telegram to Edwin Carter. The trial was set for 2 weeks away. Everything was coming to a head. The courtroom was packed. It seemed everyone in South Pass City and the surrounding area had come to watch the trial. Homesteader versus wealthy rancher. White man married to Indian woman versus establishment sensibilities. It was the most exciting thing to happen in the territory in years. Judge Hawthorne presided, stern and impartial. Luther Blackwood sat at the plaintiff's hearing with his expensive lawyer, a man named Cornelius Sharp, who had been brought in from Denver. Tom and Ayana sat with Edwin Carter, who looked rumpled and small next to Sharp's polished appearance. Blackwood's case went first. Sharp stood and addressed the court with practiced confidence. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of land rights. My client, Mr. Luther Blackwood, legally purchased 640 acres of land from a representative of the Eastern Shoshone tribe. This land includes the 160 acres currently occupied by Mr. Thomas Dalton. Mr. Dalton's homestead claim is therefore invalid, as the land was not public domain, but rather tribal territory. Sharp produced documents, official-looking papers with signatures and seals. He called a witness, a man who claimed to be a tribal representative who had sold the land to Blackwood. The man looked nervous, his testimony rehearsed. Carter cross-examined the witness carefully. You claim to be a representative of the Eastern Shoshone. What is your position in the tribe? I am a respected elder. What is your name in Shoshone? The man hesitated. Walking Bear. Carter turned to Ayana and spoke in Shoshone. She responded, and Carter nodded. My client, who is Shoshone, states that there is no elder named Walking Bear in the Eastern Shoshone tribe. She asks that you prove your tribal affiliation by speaking in your native language. The man's face went pale. He stammered, trying to form words, but it was clear he did not speak Shoshone. Judge Hawthorne leaned forward. Mr. Sharp, is this witness actually a member of the Shoshone tribe? Sharp looked furious. My client assured me. Your Honor, Carter interrupted, this witness is a fraud. He has no authority to sell tribal land because he is not tribal. This entire transaction is built on deception. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hawthorne banged his gavel for order. Mr. Sharp, I am inclined to agree with Mr. Carter. This witness lacks credibility. Do you have any other evidence? Sharp tried to rally, calling surveyors who testified that the boundaries were unclear, calling character witnesses who spoke of Blackwood's reputation. But the damage was done. The foundation of his case had crumbled. Then it was Carter's turn. He called Ayana to the stand. She stood and walked to the witness box with her head held high. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. She was striking in her size and bearing, undeniably Indian, undeniably strong. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Carter began gently. Mrs. Dalton, please tell the court your heritage. I am Shoshone, Eastern Shoshone. My father was a warrior. My mother was Crow. You are familiar with your tribe's territorial claims? Yes, I was taught from childhood where our people hunted, where we made winter camp, where the boundaries lay with other tribes. Was the land where your husband's homestead sits ever part of Shoshone territory? No, that land was Crow territory. My grandmother, who was Crow, told me stories of that valley. They called it Place of No Elk. The hunting was poor there. The Crow avoided it. When white men came, it was already abandoned. No tribe claimed it. Carter pulled out a map. Can you show the court where traditional Shoshone territory ends? Ayanna stood and pointed to areas on the map, describing boundaries in detail, explaining the geography, the history, the treaties that had established current reservations. Her knowledge was extensive and specific. She spoke with authority. Sharp tried to shake her testimony during cross-examination. Mrs. Dalton, is it not true that you were cast out of your tribe, that you have reason to testify against them? I was cast out, Ayanna said calmly, but I do not testify against my tribe. I testify to the truth. The Shoshone never owned this land. No amount of false papers will change that truth. Is it not also true that you only married Mr. Dalton to establish legal residency? That this marriage is a sham designed to circumvent the law? Tom half rose from his seat, angry, but Carter placed a hand on his arm. Ayanna looked directly at Blackwood when she answered. I married Thomas Dalton because he treated me with respect when no one else would. Because he saw me as a person, not property. Because I love him. Our marriage is more real than any paper you can produce. The courtroom was silent. Even Sharp seemed taken aback by the raw honesty in her words. Carter called one more witness. Running Elk entered the courtroom in full traditional dress, his bearing that of a chief. He was sworn in and testified that he was now a leader of the Eastern Shoshone Council of Elders. He confirmed everything Ayanna had said. He stated formally that the tribe had never authorized any sale to Luther Blackwood, that any documents claiming otherwise were fraudulent. This man Blackwood came to us with lies and money, Running Elk said. We refused him. He dishonors himself with these false claims. When the testimony concluded, Judge Hawthorne called for closing arguments. Sharp did his best to salvage the case, but it was clear that he was fighting a losing battle. Carter's closing was simple and direct. Your Honor, this case is built on fraud. False witnesses, forged documents, lies told for profit. Mr. Dalton is an honest homesteader who has met every legal requirement to claim his land. He has worked it for 5 years. He has built a home, improved the property, established residency. His claim is valid under the Homestead Act. Mr. Blackwood's claim is valid under no law except the law of greed. Judge Hawthorne took less than an hour to decide. Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of the defendant, Thomas Dalton. Mr. Blackwood's claim is dismissed as fraudulent. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to federal authorities for investigation of fraud and false representation. Mr. Blackwood, you will answer for your attempts to deceive this court. The gavel came down. Tom felt Ayanna's hand squeeze his. They had won. The land was safe. But as they left the courthouse, Tom saw Blackwood's face. The man's rage was barely contained. He looked at Tom with pure hatred, and Tom knew this was not over. Legal defeat would not stop a man like Blackwood. They rode home through the spring afternoon. The snow had melted from all but the highest peaks. Green was showing through the brown earth. Birds were returning from their winter migrations. We won, Ayanna said. The land is ours. For now, Tom replied, but Blackwood will not forget this. We need to be careful. We will be, together. They reached the homestead as the sun was setting. Their home, their land, their future. And growing in Ayanna's belly, a child who would be born into this world they were building. A child who would carry both their bloodlines, both their heritages, a bridge between two worlds. Summer came to the homestead with a warmth that seemed to bless everything it touched. Tom and Ayanna worked the land together, planting crops, expanding the garden, preparing for the arrival of their child. Running Elk visited twice, bringing gifts from the tribe. A cradle board for the baby, decorated with beadwork. Herbs that Ayanna's mother had used during her own pregnancies. Stories and advice from the tribal elders. Mrs. Harrison from town became a regular visitor as well, bringing fabric for baby clothes, offering advice from her own experience as a mother. The walls between cultures were not gone, but they were becoming more permeable, at least in this small corner of Wyoming. As autumn approached and Ayanna's belly grew large, Tom found himself both excited and terrified. Dr. Ritterreed had agreed to assist with the birth, and Running Elk's wife, White Dove, would come as well to provide traditional support. But Tom could not forget Sarah. could not shake the fear that history would repeat itself. Ayanna saw his fear and confronted it directly one evening. You think I will die like she did? I am afraid. Fear is natural, but Tom, I am not fragile. I am strong. My mother bore 7 children and lived to old age. My grandmother bore 12. Strong women in my family. I will be fine. You cannot know that. No, but I choose to believe it. You must too. Fear will not protect us. Only faith will. Tom held her carefully, feeling the baby move under his hands. I cannot lose you. You will not, I promise. In December, exactly 1 year after Ayanna had first appeared at Tom's gate, the contractions began. It was snowing again, gentle flakes that fell like a benediction. Tom rode through the snow to fetch Dr. Reed while Running Elk brought White Dove from the Shoshone camp. The labor was long but not difficult. Ayanna was strong, just as she had promised. She did not scream or cry out, just bore down with determination when the contractions came. White Dove chanted prayers in Shoshone. Dr. Reed monitored the progress with calm professionalism. Tom paced outside the bedroom door, listening to every sound, every breath. He prayed to a God he was not sure he believed in, made bargains with forces he did not understand. Please let them live. Please let them both live. As dawn broke on a new day, he heard it. The cry of a newborn baby, thin and reedy and perfect. Dr. Reed opened the door, smiling. You have a daughter, Tom, and Ayanna is doing fine. Both are healthy. Tom entered the room on shaking legs. Ayanna lay in the bed, exhausted but glowing. In her arms was a tiny bundle, a baby with dark hair and skin lighter than Ayanna's but darker than Tom's. The baby's eyes, when they opened, were a striking blue-green, a perfect blend of both parents. Hello, little Sarah, Tom whispered, touching one tiny hand. The baby grasped his finger with surprising strength. Sarah Ayanna Dalton, Ayanna said. She will carry both our names, both our heritages. She will be strong like me and kind like you. She will be the bridge between two worlds. Tom sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his wife and daughter, and felt a peace he had not known since before the war. This was what he had been searching for. Not just land or home, but family, connection, love. Outside, the snow continued to fall, gentle and pure. Inside the small homestead cabin, a new life had begun, a life that would carry forward the best of both worlds, the strength of the Shoshone and the determination of the homesteader. And two people who had been broken and alone had found, in each other and in their child, the healing they had been seeking all along. The fire had burned low. Outside the window, the winter night had deepened, and fresh snow was falling again. Old Tom Dalton sat in his rocking chair and finished his story, his voice hoarse from hours of speaking. Young Henry sat across from him, tears streaming down his face. Grandma Aya, I remember her. She used to carry me on her shoulders when I was little. I never knew her story. She did not like to speak of the past, too painful. But she wanted you to know, eventually. She made me promise to tell you before you went to war. What happened to her? She lived until 1935, 70 years old when she passed. Heart failure, quick and painless. She saw you born, saw your father grow up, saw the homestead prosper. She died happy. Tom paused. Running Elk outlived her by a year. He used to visit every summer. He and Aya would speak in Shoshone and laugh about old times. And the land, did Blackwood ever try again? Once, in 1880, he sent men to burn us out. But Running Elk had warriors watching. They stopped the attack before it started. Blackwood left the territory after that, died in Denver in 1895. Mean to the end. Henry stood and walked to the window, looking out at the land his great-grandfather had fought for. I am scared, Grandpa, about the war, about dying. Fear is natural, but Henry, you carry two bloodlines in you, the strength of the Shoshone and the stubbornness of the Daltons. You have your great-grandmother's courage and your great-grandfather's heart. You will survive. How can you be sure? Because you have something to come back to, this land, this legacy, and because you know now what really matters. Not violence or hatred or conquest, but respect. love, the choice to see others as human beings deserving of dignity. Old Tom reached into the wooden box and pulled out the turquoise necklace Ayanna had made so many years ago. He held it out to Henry. Take this. Wear it when you go to war. Remember what it means. Two different creatures walking side by side. That is the world worth fighting for. Henry took the necklace with trembling hands. I will make you proud, Grandpa. You already have. 2 years later, in 1947, Thomas Dalton died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 100, having lived to see a new century and the end of another world war. He was buried next to Ayanna on the small rise behind the homestead, overlooking the land they had fought for and built together. Henry survived the war and returned home. He married a Shoshone woman from Running Elk's tribe, honoring the connection his great-grandparents had forged. He expanded the homestead, added more land, raised 5 children who carried both bloodlines proudly. The homestead remains in the family to this day, a testament to what two people built when they chose respect over hatred, love over fear, and partnership over isolation. And every winter when the first snow falls, the family gathers at the graves on the hill and tells the story of Tom and Ayanna, the story of how a homesteader and an outcast woman built something that lasted, something that still endures. Not just land or wealth, but a legacy of love that bridges worlds and weathers every storm. The end.